The brother of a former Colombian president is arrested for suspected ties to death squads. Plus, around the United States, voters prepare to head to the polls in primaries and caucuses to nominate the next president of the United States. Thanks for joining us for teleSur's English. I'm Coddy Weddle, and this is From the South. To begin, Santiago Uribe Vélez, the brother of former Colombian President Alvaro Uribe, is suspected of having ties with death squads. Now, Uribe was arrested in the coastal city of Medellin on Monday and is accused of developing the paramilitary group known as the 12 Apostles in the 1990s during the presidency of Alvaro Uribe. Paramilitary groups targeted in that era not only guerrilla fighters but also political opponents, left-wing activists, as well as academics. They have been found guilty of committing numerous human rights abuses. Over 2,000 people are protesting against the privatization of public water services in Peru. Now, led by small neighborhood organizations and the Public Water Workers Union there in Lima, demonstrators have marched from the south of the capital to the offices of Proinversión, the government agency in charge of the privatization. For the latest now, we turn to our correspondent in Peru, Raul Mora.
We are at the protest against the privatization of water services in the city of Lima. Over 2,000 people have marched all the way from the south of the city for 20 kilometers to reach the agencies that are in charge of privatizing the services by the order of Ollanta Humala, President of the nation. They're also protesting because many people do not get the services at home, and they fear that it will be much harder and much pricier if it's privatized. Raul Mora, teleSur, Peru.
And also in Peru now, the El Niño weather phenomenon has caused heavy flooding in several regions there. On Sunday, the flooding from torrential rains caused hundreds of residents to flee their homes. The heavy rainfall caused power outages and landslides that have devastated roads and crops. Bolivia has started its annual campaign to destroy vast quantities of illegal coca crops by working with coca producers. Now, the method has helped reduce cultivation by 30% in the past 4 years. Our correspondent there in the country, Dimitri O'Donnell, reports from Bolivia.
This is Chapare in southeastern Bolivia, one of the country's main coca producing regions. Coca cultivation is allowed on 12,000 hectares, but many more thousands of hectares are used for illegal cultivation, hidden in jungle and park reserves all over the country. For the 8th year in a row, Bolivia's army and police have begun their annual crackdown on destroying the surplus crops. Year on year, coca cultivation in Bolivia is falling thanks to eradication programs like this one. For the next year, teams of soldiers will travel around the country targeting areas known for excess production of the crop.
In the last 4 years, we have reduced the amount of coca by 20,300 hectares, meaning there's less surplus coca and there's also less illegal coca.
The coca plant is used as the raw material to produce cocaine, and most producers say the annual eradication program is a way of protecting the traditional crops from narco-traffickers.
On one hand, it is good to reduce the coca, but that needs to be done equally in all areas. It has to reach the deeper parts of the area. For example, the parks. Eradication has to be carried out everywhere.
Bolivia is the world's 3rd largest source of coca, and it has special dispensation to allow the chewing of coca leaves for its indigenous population. The leaf is considered sacred in Bolivia because of its nutritional and medicinal qualities.
When I am chewing the leaf, it takes away my tiredness, thirst, and more than anything, hunger. Others say that coca is cocaine, but to us, coca is a general medicine.
Over the next year, more than 11,000 hectares of illegal coca crops will be destroyed by Bolivia's army, all in an effort to defeat the narco-traffickers. Dimitri O'Donnell, teleSur, Chapare.
The government of Argentina, President Mauricio Macri, has reached an agreement with speculative investors which obliges the country to pay billions of dollars to those so-called vulture funds. Now, according to the legal mediator of the vulture fund case, Daniel Polak, if the deal goes through, Argentina must pay $4.6 billion by April 14th. But in order to be approved, the accord has to be ratified by Congress. For that to happen, laws which ensure Argentina's financial sovereignty would have to be overturned. Polak assures that in order to satisfy the demands of the deal, Argentina will look for funds internationally. With the continued lows in international oil prices and a 2014 constitutional reform that opened Mexico's energy industry to privatization, the country's state-owned oil giant Pemex seems to be on its final legs. Our correspondent Clayton Kahn now reports from Mexico.
While economists believe that allowing private companies to import gasoline and diesel for the first time in more than 75 years will push down gas prices in Mexico, some motorists believe that the authorities should invest more in the state-owned oil company Pemex.
We have a lot of oil, and I think we need to have our own gasoline. It shouldn't come from other places. We need to sell the gas and the oil that is pumped from our country.
With the 2014 energy reform, Mexico opened its energy industry to privatization for the first time since 1938. With a drop in international oil prices and Mexico's neoliberal strategy to reduce investments in Pemex, the oil giant, which provides 1/3 of Mexico's budget for public spending, now confronts a $5.5 billion cut from government funds for the year of 2016.
The effort needs to be focused on Pemex, given that it is not only confronting a drop in its prices, but it also needs to redefine its business strategy in this new context of prices and with a new institutional framework.
On Monday, the state-owned company's recently appointed director Jose Gonzalez Anaya announced the 2016 budget adjustment plan, reiterating the government's slash in billions of dollars and that the previous budget was based on an average of crude prices of $50 a barrel rather than the current $25 a barrel. Anaya argues that the adjustments are to preserve the long-term solvency of Pemex.
Pemex confronts liquidity and financial problems in the short term. However, it is a company that is widely solvent.
Meanwhile, analysts argue that the announcements of major budget cuts and readjustments translates to an overall plan to dissolve the company that has been a pillar of Mexico's economy for more than 7 decades. Ultimately, critics of the government's plan to reduce the funding and capacity of Pemex say those most directly affected is the company's unionized workforce. In 2015, an estimated 10,000 of the company's 145,000 workers were laid off, and it is expected a similar, if not higher, number of workers will be laid off in 2016. Clayton Kahn, teleSur's, Mexico City.
Tuesday is a key moment in the United States presidential election cycle. Now, it's called Super Tuesday because it's the day when the largest number of U.S. states are given the chance to cast votes for Republican and Democratic presidential candidates. And it's seen as a key turning point in the campaigns and one that narrows the field there. We remind you, 5 mainstream Republican candidates will compete tomorrow. On the Democratic side, and the race for the White House remains between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton.
She has a super PAC, actually more than one. The last report was. And while Donald Trump is, of course, the greatest, smartest, and best person in the history of the world, according to Donald Trump, and of course he is one of the great scientists in the history of the world, we do not agree with Donald Trump that climate change is a hoax brought to us by the Chinese.
And staying there with Donald Trump, we had our team in Mexico ask residents south of the U.S. border what they think of Trump, and especially many of his outspoken comments that have offended many Mexicans. Take a look.
I think he's a terrible person because he doesn't know how to appreciate everything that Mexicans do for the United States. It's the Mexicans who are pushing that country forward. I have had the opportunity to travel to many parts of the United States, and the people are very nice. I don't know why this Mr. Trump wants to attack us when he really should be thanking us.
I think he's a very unpleasant person without any education and who really doesn't know what he's talking about.
The Syrian ceasefire is facing its first serious test after reported breaches on both sides. Syrian opposition leaders have claimed the ceasefire is close to collapsing. Now, it came into force on Friday night and was widely thought to have held on the first day, but on Sunday, the Syrian High Negotiating Council, which represents rebel factions, said that breaches had nullified the process. In the middle of the allegations of the breaches, an international task force met in Geneva. Now, the aim was to bolster the fragile truce The task force was co-chaired by Moscow and Washington, where they evaluated the range of alleged violations of the agreement. Prominent Greek politician and economist Yanis Varoufakis has been named as an advisor to Britain's opposition Labour Party. The announcement was made by Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn. The Labour Party says the leftist Varoufakis was brought on board to raise the level of public debate on economics. Macedonian police fired tear gas this morning at refugees who were trying to tear down a gate at the Greek border. At least 22,000 have been stranded in Greece in the past week since border restrictions began in countries in the Balkan corridor. Tear gas was also used on refugees in the Calais, the so-called jungle refugee camp, where the French police started to dismantle it. One person there was arrested. The camp houses about 3,000 refugees from war-torn countries. A Malian jihadi leader faces the International Criminal Court's first cultural war crimes trial for destroying UNESCO heritage monuments in Timbuktu. According to UNESCO, this trial will send a clear message that destruction of cultural property will not go unpunished. The trial of 95-year-old Humbert Zafke, who was accused of overseeing over 3,600 murders, has been put on hold due to his poor health. Zafke served as a medic in the SS at the biggest death camp in occupied Poland. Three former bosses of the company in charge of Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan have been indicted. They face up to 5 years in prison or a penalty of nearly $9 million. A group of National Football League players are currently in Egypt to promote American football. The 10 professional athletes were also representing the organization American Football Without Barriers, as it's called. They will be there for a week to help train enthusiasts and players of that sport. The athletes took advantage of their visit to Egypt by visiting the Giza pyramids and the Sphinx. Children of an elementary school in Taiwan have turned plastic bottle caps into creative art with an environmental message. They covered the walls of their school with large fresco-like pictures, landscapes, marine animals, and other scenes that draw inspiration from nature. That's what we're covering on this Monday, the last day of February here. Thanks for joining us for teleSur's English. I'm Coddy Weddle. Be sure to follow us on all social media. We'll see you back here tomorrow.